Hey everyone, welcome back to Inside Debt Settlement. I'm Dave Hanrahan, the CEO of Kredit, and today I'm joined by Robin Ivie-Wilder, a true expert when it comes to lender and debt settlement relations. Robin, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
So Robin, you've worked across both sides of the ecosystem, both on the creditor side and representing different debt settlement firms and also on the data side as well. From your perspective, why does the relationship between debt settlement firms and lenders matter so much?
So for the most part, again, just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying, I've worked most of my career in recovery operations, in collections, and then spent a few years on the debt settlement side. While on the recovery operations side, I was building out numerous processes for working with debt settlement companies, and found it to be very important to have a direct line of communication
Mm.
to individuals at these debt settlement companies. One, just to understand what of our inventory is enrolled in the debt settlement program, as well as those that maybe have funds available for settlement, and to really just understand our inventory and know what's going to be paying here in the near future.
Got it. Okay. So is it fair to say like it gives the lender better visibility of kind of like that forward-looking expectation versus just knowing like, hey, here's like the value at risk?
That I've worked for in the past, right? Constantly looking for ways to identify higher propensity to pay accounts, right?
Mhm.
Um, and in that, we found that developing relationships or having a process for debt settlement was a big way of doing that. You
Yeah.
have consumers that are enrolled in these programs for whatever reasons, whatever hardships that they were running into, but they're still wanting to pay back their debt. And building these relationships with the debt settlement programs had given us visibility to those consumers that were wanting to pay, and really when they would be able to pay. So you kind of have an understanding a lot quicker of what of your inventory is liquidable, I guess is the best way to say it. So.
Yeah. That makes sense. Makes sense. Do you think that like the friction in those different types of relationships, um, where do you see any strain in the counterparty relationship come from when those relationships aren't super flexible?
Yeah, so I'm surprised that there's still some strain out there.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's not as much as it used to be. We started talking to companies about debt settlement probably back in 2007 to 2010 time frame, but it's really just a lack of understanding of how the processes work, and how the partnerships can be developed. There's a lot of misinformation out there on how debt settlement companies work, how their enrollment processes work, how they market to different individuals, and a lot of it is really myth, right? We have the same common goal when it comes to settling our mutual clients' debt. The end goal is to make sure that the creditor gets a payment and our client, in debt settlement, their accounts are settled.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And is it more about the communication breakdowns or are there structural gaps too? Like it feels like there might be some either misaligned expectations of like, hey, to your point earlier on like getting that forward guidance, like what accounts are, going to settle at. Like we'll see wide variations where, some portfolios of accounts, 1% of accounts will get resolved per month. In other portfolios, it's like 40% of accounts are, resolved after 30 days. Like, is it more about communication breakdowns or are there structural gaps like uh, unclear expectations about settlement velocity or data being missing that drives friction in relationships?
Lack of understanding of how the relationships can work,
Mm.
how the debt settlement industry do work, and understanding lack of understanding the type of partnerships that you can and can't have. We've noticed just over the years, A lot more of the creditors are more open to having these type of relationships. And as time goes on, more and more are reaching out to us, eager to have some type of a relationship. And I think it's just really individuals becoming more open-minded or moving around through different agencies and having an understanding of how productive their relationships have been in the past, or having a relationship can be for the most part.
Yeah, it totally feels much more proactive in terms of the engagement today versus kind of like the historically reactive approach there. Um, and in relationships, nobody ever wants to be constantly having somebody else take and then being the giver. I guess, do you feel like the same applies on the debt settlement firm side and the lender side? Like, do you feel like there's parity between both sides seeking to engage the other more on an even footing than it has been historically?
Yeah, we do pretty well with it today, right where we
Mhm.
are today. For the most part, we have a lot of creditors that have a direct relationship with us
Yeah.
because they're understanding, right, the value in working with a debt settlement company. But um, yeah, I mean, for the most part, as you were talking about being proactive versus reactive, really the benefit overall is to understanding upfront, who's enrolled in the program, and really just getting in line to be kind of next paid in a settlement.
Um, so on the flip side, when things are working well between debt settlement firms and creditors, what do those relationships look like, or what can they look like for different lenders or servicers that want to lean into them?
So those creditors that we work with and have relationships with today, a lot of our processes are streamlined. A lot of the creditors have built out internal automation. Um, Once you have a certain process in place with debt settlement or for debt settlement, you can build in certain automation. It unties up a lot of your resources to where you can work in a bulk fashion. And within bulk, you can settle accounts in bulk. You can receive letters in bulk. You can receive payments in bulk. Um, and you kind of just build that out to what works best, for your team, for your system. But
Hmm.
having those relationships with debt settlement companies really benefits on the creditor side, and it really helps to streamline a lot of their recovery and collection processes.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to get those technical handshakes in place if you don't have the human to human handshake in terms of, hey, like,
Right,
are we mutually aligned on making this work well
right.
together? Yeah. When you think about like the consistency in process and flexibility, obviously different lenders are in some circumstances unique, and different debt settlement firms might be unique in their needs, and accommodating different people's uniqueness increases the work required there. How do you think about striking that balance between consistency in process and shared best practices and learnings over time with meeting different organizations where they are today?
Yeah, agree that it would be great if there was some consistency in how the data is shared, how even we receive it or send it out on our side.
Mhm.
Some of the creditors that we're working with today, or in my experiences, they each have a different way of how they want to receive files. Um, Either way, on the debt settlement side as well, sometimes they're wanting different formatting or different templates to be used, or different um, naming conventions for different files. So it it would be very beneficial for there to be some consistency across the board with how files are received, and really just making sure that it's compliant and consistent in how it's approached. So,
Yeah, yeah. To your point earlier, there's open lines of communication. Uh, when you can explain, hey, I understand your business objective with XYZ process because I've been in your shoes before, and here's this other alternative way to do it that similarly accomplishes those goals. That relationship again probably just it must help so much as you go through and try to accommodate those things, but explain that there's alternatives there. When you think about the mutual value for stakeholders and making that really sustainable, are there a couple like key metrics or things that you look at to just demonstrate like what is the payoff of these relationships, working well?
What of your, as far it depends, I struggle with what side I'm on sometimes, right?
Hmm.
Just having experience on both on the creditor side and on the debt settlement side. But if I'm wearing my creditor hat, really just identifying upfront those individuals that are in a debt settlement program. If I were to place those out, I'm going to probably place those out in like a different fee bracket. I would like to, group them together. I'd like to monitor them together. I know that there is a higher chance for these to pay at a certain amount.
Hmm.
I know that I'm going to see a return at, 50, 55% in some cases, over, my inventory that, we're just going to have to kind of forecast based on, um, on a placement amount, et cetera. Um, I know that there is a good chance that a large majority of these accounts are going to stay in the program and pay out at some point. So,
Got it. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I guess that forward visibility and the predictability definitely makes sense on that side. Um, Taking a step back, obviously lenders have their own incentives and their own operations and businesses, and debt settlement firms have their own businesses, and the consumers kind of, the mutual objective is to help this consumer get out of a hardship situation. How do you think about the relationship between the debt settlement firm and the lender impacting that consumer? Does it have an impact on the consumer?
it does, the creditor is not willing to work with the debt settlement company, right? We have
Mm,
to remember that when an individual enrolls into a debt settlement company, they're enrolling in the program because of some situation that has changed in their life, uh, particular hardship that has come to light. And so this is now their preferred method of communication. And when you have creditors that are refusing to work with debt settlement companies, that really delays their processes in getting ahead of whatever hardship that they're currently facing.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Is it fair to say, I guess, through this process that it's really like one giant trust building exercise? Because I imagine from a creditor's perspective, you're engaging with the counterparty being a debt settlement firm, and you're trusting a lot of the forward guidance of, hey, here's how much you can expect to go through and resolve, or here's the position that consumer's in. I mentioned a lot of like the relationship building is like, hey, like can I trust you to go through and help me get that forward guidance such that I can rely on it?
Yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, I think what individuals lack understanding, or on the creditor side when working with the debt settlement company. A lot of the debt settlement companies are, if I would say the majority of them are very transparent in how their processes work. And I agree that building trust with debt settlement is very important, right? We're sharing data back and forth. We're settling out a large number of accounts, a lot of the inventory, and so on. We want to make sure that the relationship with the creditor is strong and that we have trust built, on the creditor side as well as the client side. So trust just overall is very important.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. For us as a network, like my goal is in many ways to get out of the way and take care of background stuff, so that people can invest more time in those direct relationships. Because I mean, we see a direct correlation between strong settlement volumes and fast time to settlement, and those relationships being open and having clear lines of communication. I guess looking ahead, and as you think about continuing to strengthen these relationships. Obviously, there's some lenders who are just coming into the point in their maturation where they're starting to work more with debt settlement firms, and there's an element of catch up that they're going through. For the organizations that there's already good relationships in place, what do you think people can continue to do to invest in those going forward and making them even stronger?
My experience is just continuous communication, continuing to be transparent, understanding on both sides. When I say transparency, the transparency needs to come from both sides, right? If you're looking to make it on the creditor side, if you're looking to make changes internally or shift things around, keep us in the loop. If you're looking to change your settlement parameters and terms, etc., keep us in the loop. And then vice versa on the settlement side, making changes, anything that comes up along the way, just continuous communication. I like to be in front of our creditor partners at least, if not monthly, at least quarterly, connect at the conferences, talk about, any issues that you may have, any concerns that you may have. A lot of us on the debt settlement side, we're willing to clear up and answer any of the questions that you have in full transparency, obviously, where we can do so.
Yeah. No, your point on the policy changes is critical. There's often circumstances we observe where policy changes are made with no affirmative communication of, hey, this policy is changing, and then everyone spends a couple weeks spinning their wheels trying to orient around the new policy, where it's like, a simple heads up could have been really, really helpful. And obviously, there's certain things you can communicate sooner than later. But there's generally a world where you can do that well. Yeah, hear you loud and clear there. How do you think about technology and the different advancements there? Has that had a beneficial impact on how different firms have been able to talk to each other on the inverse sides of the ecosystem?
Being in recovery operations for the large majority of my career, I've watched the technology advance over time, and I think it's great. I think that it has helped in how we're transferring a lot of our data and communicating with different creditors. I guess to say, in our communications and what we have today with the creditors being on the debt settlement side, not much has changed as far as how we're transferring data. But again, there's a lot of tools that are in place, especially this one, Kredit, that is actually very helpful in transferring data and so on. So.
Yeah. It feels like there's so much stuff changing in the technology world where there's a lot of benefit for everybody involved. Listen, Robin, this has been really, really insightful. And again, I always love talking to people who have experience on both sides of the ecosystem, because you can nitpick points of view very, very effectively. But any final advice for teams on either side who want to build stronger and more effective relationships?
I would say stay as transparent as possible. Continue to work towards building relationships and doing the right thing. On the creditor side, have an open mind, right? And recovery operations is continuously and ever evolving. Debt settlement is not something that's going away, and we're seeing more and more of the consumer base enrolling into such programs. So having a process built out and in place is just only going to be beneficial to your team.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Listen, appreciate the time again, and thank you. So thanks for all those listening, and hopefully this was valuable for you.
Thank you.